Thank you. If you could start us with a Karakia, I would appreciate it.
More than happy to, Bruce. Kia ora mai tātou te whānau mi noi tātou. E o ngā mano tēnei te whakamoimata tu kia koe mo tēnei huhu ngā mātou. Arahina mai ki au kia ki te tika ki te puni a mātou. Atukua mai te wairua tapu, hei manaki, hei awhi he te aki uki a mātou. Nei mātou e tuohu nea nui e tuaruaru, a katuku i tēnei inui I rungi te mō te mātou kai whakaore i Kraiti.
Amen. Appreciate that, Josh. That's really superb. I think it's important. Thank you for the chance to shake everybody's hand, but just to formally acknowledge everybody's success in the elections. Colin and Rob, well done, and welcome to the committee. Red and Hendy, well done on your success. Is it retaining? I don't know whether that's the right word, but anyway, being elected, which is superb. So, I'm great you come back for another triennium of punishment, Hendy. It's superb. It's great to have you here. And as a result of that, in terms of the agenda, I have just asked that we take a wee bit of time just looking at what the role of the committee is. And so perhaps before we get to the formal part of the agenda, which obviously, well, actually I should do the first part, which is an apologies. Do we have any apologies, Nadine, at this stage? Someone's just running in? Oh, Tony. Right, okay, so we're racing in, sorry, thank you. Okay, well, thank you. It's okay, Josh. So there are no apologies, which is absolutely fine. We'll come to items 2 onwards once I've had a quick chance just to, for the benefit of actually probably all the committee, but in part, g'day, Tony, up here, buddy. We've got a nameplate for you and everything. So welcome to the meeting. Kia ora. I thought it was useful as we start the meeting to just spend 10 minutes focusing on what a good audit and risk committee is. Just to rock through this, I've actually got 18 slides. I'm not going to go through 18, you'll be pleased to know. But just to give you a sense of the direction and the flavour that I would like to bring to the committee. I would welcome questions if you had any, albeit that, Riet, tell me after 8 minutes that I've only got 2 minutes to go, would you? That would be helpful. So let's see where we go. How do I make this thing go? Point it that way. Oh, a bit like that. Well, that's a good question. Oh, look at that. Okay. Look, these slides will be available to everybody afterwards. For the new members, that's my very short CV. Sufficient to say, in my business, I do a fair chunk of work around audit and risk committees, and there's a few of them around the country. And indeed, I have an audit background. So whether that qualifies me to be a professional in the game of audit and risk committees is another story. But anyway, there we are. This gives you a sense that I've been around for about 40 years. So I think a positive thing, a thing that I'd like to actually just put in front of you is that we talk about risk. What is risk? Risk is that something bad happens. Okay, but the flip side of risk is what? What's the O word? It is opportunity. So the critical thing here is actually our role as a committee is to give confidence to the rest of the elected members that we have a fair chance of meeting our objectives. Okay, and so our objectives are these that are in front of you, at least they are at the moment. This is straight out of the long-term plan. And I guess context is everything, even for those of you that are newly elected. You are walking into an organisation that has an existing vision and has an existing set of outcomes. And indeed, the next one is it has a set of strategic priorities. So our role as a committee, primarily using that risk name, is actually to think comprehensively what's going to stop us from achieving these objectives. This is the reason we believe that we exist. So in fact, when we look at risk, if the risk doesn't relate to these, there's a good question, what are we doing? So the point I'm trying to make ultimately is that our role is really positive, even though we deal with what bad things might happen. Because we are looking to ensure that we achieve positively for the council in the first place, and obviously the broader community as far as it goes. So we're in the opportunity game by focusing on risks. Is that fair enough? That's my first key point. Any comments? No? Good. Second part is, this is a little diagram, and I won't tell you where it came from because it's a somewhat long story, although there's a public report at Queenstown Lakes District Council if you want to read it. This is my summation about what our role is as governors. Okay, so this is a governance 101. And it really comes within that sort of, it's almost a circle, but it's actually a rectangle. What is the role of governors? And it is firstly to set strategy, right? Classic, you know, you guys are part of IOD, that's what we do. We create the strategy. We define what is the outcome. It's not that different to what's happened with that LTP. The little circle underneath that is simply that we empower somebody to do that. And hello, Nadine, that's just about almost always you to get on with the job. And that's the way we do work. The reason that I wrote this report to Queenstown Lakes was they had forgotten coming back to the strategy by monitoring. And so again, the classic governance role, set the strategy, empower and monitor. And that's a really important part that we as a committee play in terms of helping council undertake its role as governors and in monitoring the performance of the organisation. I'm not going to come back to that. There are two other bits. The one that's going vertical is called policy making, and the one underneath is accountability, which is governance as accountability, particularly in our case to its public and constituents. Won't deal with that. That's a governance 101. But I want to reflect that this role sits firmly, the role of this committee sits firmly in that governance role of monitoring. Risk is, and I guess the opportunities, I should really start with the flavour one, the opportunities, but actually the risks that are attached to that come in a whole myriad. There is really hundreds of risks that we could, if we chose to. Steve, you probably do, inside the organisation want to identify. But our ballpark relates to what generally is called strategic risk. So again, it comes back to the big thing that we have talked about, what's going to stop us from achieving our objectives and our outcomes. The bottom one is operational. Okay, now that is Nadine and her executives team responsibility. Our role within the committee is not to dive into operational risk. It is to clearly understand what is the systems and processes, the framework that management have in place to manage operational risk. We generally don't go there. Actually, interestingly, it pops up a couple of stages in our papers today. I was thinking of one of them would be when in Steve, your report, you got a couple of comments, for instance, about the wastewater treatment plant and the Kiwa pools. That's an operational matter. But because of its significance, I think quite rightly, and well done, it's in the papers. But we don't primarily dive into that from a risk perspective, albeit there's risk attached to it. But it's useful information for us to understand the broader nature of our risk. Organisational sits in the middle, and we're going to deal with some of those as part of our strategic risks, and I'll come back to that. But our game is to play with the big end of town. What's going to stop us from getting and dealing with those strategic risks, okay? Let's not get too worried about diagram. And if, again, you've already gone through your papers, you'll realise we have how many risks? So 13, thank you. There goes the 13 one on there. Okay, can I just reflect? I said we deal with strategic risks. I think those are all strategic risks. Some of them, though, look like they come out of an area that we might say are either operational or organisational. And I can't read from here. Look at the third one down, people and capability. Like the rest of the sector, and it comes through again in your report, Steve, there are challenges in recruiting and retaining staff at Gisborne. And I want to stress that is no different to if I was sitting in Auckland or if I was sitting in Invercargill, as I do. We all are challenged. Okay, now that's primarily an operational issue. Nadine's our only employee. She has, and we should equip her to get out and have the staff that she needs. But because good staff are critical to achieving, the vision and the outcomes, it's an issue which is in front of us. So that's a situation where something which is operational, generally in flavour, needs to come our way as governance. Rightio. So we're going to have a chance when we get to the paper to go through those. So I'm not going to focus on those. When you get to see these, no, there's 13 of them. Thank you, Red. Quite right. You'll see that we like to talk about actually a heat map. I prefer a diagram, Steve. It's, that I'm a diagram man. And it just reflects that if we don't deal with these 13 risks, we can expect bad things to happen. We aren't going to achieve the good things that we want to achieve for Gisborne. The reality of it is, as we go through it and we analyse these, you can see that we're moving most of those risks out of the red, and we'll come back to the red one this morning, out of the red towards the ideal part of the heat map, which is to where it's low risk and it's okay. Yeah, go for it, Andy.
Is LC legal compliance? It is, isn't it?
LC is legal compliance. Yeah.
So with being a unitary authority, we have stronger responsibilities to legal compliance than a district council.
I wouldn't have thought that you've got a broader range. I mean, in the sense that you've got your resource management planning aspects, which are broader. Albeit that a territorial also has resource management responsibilities as well. I wouldn't personally have tried to make the distinction. Yeah, just that the suite of concerns is arguably wider.
Do you see any differences for a unitary with audit and risk responsibilities?
Gee whiz, Nadine, I'd say no to that. Would you have a view? You're the one that's keeping me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just by the nature of having more activities,
yeah.
You're exposed to more risks or opportunities. So what you might have, for example, of civil defence, where our emergency management response is a key risk. It's quite different being a unitary than it would be if you are providing emergency services
right.
of TLA. So I just think by its nature of the different functions that we deliver, we are exposed to more.
Yeah. So look, I take on board. I mean, I accept that quantum is greater, but and therefore the areas of downside are broader, but generally the issues of legal compliance are ones which are shared in terms of the impact and effect on a particular organisation around the sector. That one there, by the way, is that's a territorial. So that's not a unitary, that's a territorial. But I just chucked this one up because actually I was doing the same presentation with another council, and I thought it was worthwhile just showing that the risks that we see as big that could stop us from achieving our vision and outcome are pretty similar. And you'll see on that one, supply chain issues, lack of resources, failure to comply with legislation, Treaty Waitangi commitments, the whole lot. They look pretty familiar. And so the issues that we face in Gisborne by name are similar. By nature, they are always specific, and we need to be attuned to that. And that's why we do things like deep dives, which Steve will take us through progressively over the course of a number of meetings. Okay. So just a couple of quick things then about our role. Okay, we're called an Audit and Risk Committee. Sometimes I prefer to call them risk and assurance committees because our work is based primarily from the platform of risk. And we're wanting to get assurance that those risks are managed appropriately. If I go back to my heat map, my assurance that I want to be able to give, and we should be wanting to give to the rest of our governing colleagues, is that actually we've got controls which actually mean those risks are less likely to occur and stop us from achieving our objectives, the opportunity that we're after. That becomes really important. So, what's that? I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? Sorry. So the role is pretty simple. We focus on risk and we seek to gain assurance the controls are okay. We do have, and that's actually part of, again, one of the issues as the Audit and Risk Committee, we have the primary relationship with our external auditors. And that's lesser of a play now. We dealt with them last meeting, didn't we, Pauline? Although we've got them coming through as we consider Gisborne. And indeed, we have a responsibility about the form, the content, and particularly the integrity, the reliability of our external reporting. That's particularly our annual report. There are other things that is worthwhile noting. So part of both your risk and part of your assurance program is clearly things like insurance, which we keep our eye on. And also, as you'll see when we get to PX, is things like our legal risks and what have you. So that's really it. And an important point is occasionally from time to time, council may choose to ask us to keep an eye on something that is a particular matter or risk for them. Rightio, last two slides. What do we do? I've got a couple of minutes to go. So members, and I'm talking to you as members of the committee. We are expected professionally. Actually, what do we say? We say in our terms of reference with due care, with diligence, and gee whiz, I've forgotten the third word. There's another descriptor there. Sorry. Skill. Thank you. How could I forget skill? We are being asked to ask searching questions of management. Now, I can remember my first meeting. I asked management to sit around the table because we aren't a political grouping. We're actually quite functional in nature. We can't make a policy decision at all. We have no skill, we have no capability to do that. Sitting around the table, both as elected members, appointed, and also as management is really important and I think valuable. But at one point in time, there is a distinction. And that's when we consider the papers, and our role is to hold management's feet to the fire. So we will ask searching questions, and as chair, I hopefully will enable that. Because ultimately, through asking searching questions, we can refine, enhance, and be a better organisation. There is a but, and it comes on the second page. We aren't a star chamber. Our role is not to, put it this way, if we come to the room negatively that management's always wrong, please don't come to my committee. I have, through good experience here, but generally across the sector, come with the view that management advice is to be respected and should be respected. I also believe that we need to, within this committee, both in public and private, keep the environment safe for management. In other words, ask your searching questions. That is your role. But let's remember we're dealing with the issue and not the person. I don't have to say that too loudly here. I do in some of my other responsibilities elsewhere, but I better not name which councils they are. Okay. And the third thing that I really insist on from members of the committee is that we're solution focused. Because some of these, well, actually, Steve, all of those issues are big issues. And they need our collective wisdom to try and think through what is the appropriate response. So let's ask our searching questions. Let's test and refine each other, but let's do it safely where we are dealing with the issue and not the person. And let's see if we can work together on the solution. If you are happy to sign up to that approach, where we respect staff, you're in my team, okay? Otherwise, we might not have such a happy relationship. So there we are. I had to put it, due care, diligence and skill is what we do. And as I've said, we don't have any capacity to make to make any policy decisions. Our role simply is to recommend to full council. We're working on their behalf. We're very much, dare I say it, behind the scenes. That's the intention. Guys, that's me. Is there any thoughts that people like to raise that's raised with them? It should be, at least hopefully for Ed and Andy, pretty standard, or Josh, pretty standard for what we've tried to practice in the past. Are there any comments folk would like to make? Or Nadine, you're in management, most welcome to make them at the stage. We're right? Yes, Colin.
Colin Alder. One question. Can issues be addressed between meetings, or do issues only at meetings?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's almost a governance 101 question, Colin, rather than just the straight issue of the committee. Look, the answer is certainly from a risk perspective, we only meet 4 times a year. I often say 5, 4 plus 1. Particularly we've got to deal with the annual report, or perhaps we might consider a workshop or something. So in fact, you know, that's a long time between drinks. And certainly as your chair, there's a level of communication between me with the council that goes on monitoring or understanding where the risks are going. And there's no reason in that sense that you shouldn't. The thing we have to recognise is preserving the sanctity of a council meeting, as in a committee meeting. And if there is a role for there to be a debate, particularly in public, we should make certain the decision making occurs in a meeting and that is public. But we will obviously have conversations potentially around risk or issues in between meetings. But we need to recognise that. Nadine, I've got to check with you. You're doing probably induction work. Am I consistent with what you're talking about with governance? Does it answer your question, Colin? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Groovy, that's good. Well, thank you for that time. It's worthwhile just to have that at the start and make certain that we at least you know where I'm coming from and reflect on that. Colin, if you've got more questions, you're welcome to make contact with me in between meetings, and I'm more than happy to share my views as far as that's concerned. So we dealt with apologies. There have been none. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest people would like to make? Yes, Josh, please.
Just a declaration of interest for paper 22253 of the council appointee to GH. Just want to note that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I would also like to declare a conflict of interest as having been on Gisborne Holdings until the 1st of October. This paper is actually assessing the previous 12 months. So at that stage, I will step down and sit in the public forum.
Great. Thank you for that. And for clarity, Josh, you given your role, you will stay in for these items or this item.
Yes, that's
obviously.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. Are there any other declarations that should be? No, there being none. I would move that we note those declarations and thank you, Riet. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, the action sheet and governance work plan. I'm never quite certain. Pauline, do I look to you? I'm never quite certain who I look to for the action sheet these days. Can we say it's covered? It's very helpful. This has always been an issue of ongoing concern around forestry insurance. And there's good clarity there from Andrew about what the insurance covers. Josh.
Just prior to the action sheet and governance work plan, Mr. Chair, just wanting to note maybe in our terms of reference for us to update our membership, which still has chairs of committees down as members of the Audit and Risk Committee.
Yeah, I can speak to that. We certainly will through the chair. I think the timing of the gender compilation with the committee structures appointment was just two of those things, just slightly out.
Thank you very much.
Do that for the next meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. That's really good. I appreciate the attention to detail. That's superb. Thank you. We'll note that. I don't think we need to have a resolution. Action sheet, I think, as I said, that's noted. Were there any questions that arose from that? Yes, Colin.
Mr. Chairman, the insurance on.
By the way, you're welcome to call me Bruce. I like informality. If you want to be formal, that's fine. But you're welcome to call me Bruce.
Cheers, Bruce. The insurance on forest.
Yep.
and carbon forest in particular.
Mm.
And it also is going to be a question for Gisborne Holdings.
Yes.
In the event of a fire, where do we stand with carbon credits?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that, to be honest.
Through the chair.
Thanks, Pauline.
We don't have forestry as protected as a loss of income, and that would be in terms of what would you lose in that area. So that currently is just a liability policy that we actually have. It may be that if a fire comes from our property onto someone else's, it comes from me. So we don't have currently the loss of income that we might have had for the forest being about.
I think the question you're asking, Colin, is actually what happens in terms of carbon accounting if your part of your forest burns down? Do you have to surrender the? You wouldn't by any chance have to know, Rob. I'm reflecting that you know I'm potentially playing on your interests.
Yeah, this is a actually a huge one, and it does fall right into this risk part of it. Traditionally, you've had forest cover, like with the farm forest I'm talking about, which covers firefighting costs for your if it starts on you're liable for that. But loss of income, it's a bit like loss of income from livestock or anything else like that through a natural disaster. You can't insure it against that. The forestry side of it, where this opens up a can of worms is the carbon liability. Now this is actually becoming huge, and that can stay with you for a long time. So I think it is something that maybe definitely needs to get another opinion on. I think it would be really worthwhile for everybody to understand that, because you can insure anything, but the cost of insuring become a prohibitive.
It becomes a gift that keeps on giving, Pauline. Rob, you wouldn't know how many times this action items come back with additions and needs for information. Could you make some inquiry, please, about the impact on carbon credits, etc.? That would be helpful. Because actually, it is. I think, as you're quite rightly saying, Rob, particularly as we deal with now, but going into the future with both our own holdings, but particularly Gisborne Holdings, the issue of carbon credit and carbon credit accounting is going to become really important, and indeed the liability that's attached to it. Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you for that. Work program, Pauline.
So on page 5, it's just what we've identified at this particular point will be another in conjunction in the new year, once we actually have strategic risks, all of them identified, there may be an internal audit program that comes back to committee for approval. So that's a little bit, that's to be discussed in the year, but basically on page 5, what is up to this point, the new year will put in the normal regular reports, and the normal regular reports is obviously strategic risk, health and safety, legal, and look at insurance strategies and other things. We'll formulate that new one.
Yes, great.
I should probably know this answer, but I forgot. For us, we've recently, in the last, say, 6 months, maybe in the last year, did all our risks. We've had all our workshops to get a collective risk appetite. Do we do that every triennium, or do we do that every year? What is the best practice to make sure our risks are current? I'm sure if something, comes up, we add that, but just for our normal risk, is it an annual process or a triennial process?
Steve?
Thank you, through you, Chair. In our current situation, I'm actually recommending in this commentary today that we revisit our schedule of strategic risks early in the new year and revisit them and reconfirm that they are the strategic risks that are still relevant and appropriate for where the council is currently at. So the intention will be to run a further risk workshop in the new year. Whether that then becomes an annual or 3 yearly, I think it's really down to the types of risk we're seeking to manage and how quickly they're changing.
That's a great answer, because why I was asking that is we do have 8 new people around our table, and we did talk about collective risk appetite. So now we might have the same collective risk appetite, or there might be stuff that jumped from number 7 to number 3 or number 4 to number 6. So I'm happy that as a new council, we'll be revisiting all of those and then take it from there. Thank you for that.
We've been on a maturity journey, which I think actually is really pleasing. Can I just sort of put a plug in for Gisborne? I keep selling particularly the work we have done around risk appetite. This is possibly the most mature council I've got, that we are dealing with risk appetite in the way we are. And you see that coming out in the papers where, Steve's saying this is the strategic risk, this is what our appetite is, this is where it's at. And actually it's above where we want to be at. It's really good reporting. It's what it should be. But for councillors to engage with risk appetite as we did, what was it, 18 months ago? I forget now. It was good, but your point is well made. So actually, if I could reflect on good practice, we should meet annually to review the risk profile. Doesn't need to be long, but it does need to be done. And the second part is, yes, I would be very keen that we invite all councillors to do that, because then they have had an input to what we're actually managing and doing, which is superb. Thank you for that question, Steve. Thank you for that. That's helpful as well. So look, we'll take the program as it stands. So if I could just move a motion that we receive the action item, the governance plan. Do I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Andy. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. I've got no leave of absence notifications, acknowledgement and tributes. Do we have any? No. Can I say, just as an aside, I ran into Pat the other day at in Wellington, and it was nice to be able to give her a hug and say, "How's it going, Pat?" So there's I should already emailed you this one. Okay, well, perhaps she's not going. I don't know, but it was lovely to see her and to catch up with her. It was totally coincidental, but lovely. So nice to meet old friends that you make through your work. I haven't been informed of any public input or petitions, so that's great. Nor notice of any extraordinary business or notices of motion, and we've got nothing to adjourn at this stage. Phew, that's good. Up to item 10. That's great. So Nadine and team, we're into your part, please. Steve, I suspect we go straight to you, please, over the strategic risk management report.
Thank you. Thank you. And through you, Chair, if I provide my commentary on the report, I'm happy to take questions as I go. But I draw the committee's attention to page 7 of the report, the paragraph 3, strategic risk update summary table. On the right-hand column, the committee will see that we have completed our residual risk assessment on 9 of our 13 strategic risks. We have 4 remaining risks still to be assessed. 3 of those remaining risks are interconnected, and it was felt that it would be more appropriate to complete those risk assessments with this committee post the election with a new administration, given the impacts on potentially the overall council strategy. So the intention is that those 3 risks will be assessed and reported back to this committee. But the intention is, as previously advised, is to reconfirm with the council that we have the right basket of strategic risks. And with these 3 risks in particular, we have clarity over what the actual risk event is that we are trying to either prevent from occurring or to mitigate the impact and consequences. And it's also timely, given that we are about to start, we have just started the next long-term plan process, and we also have the Tairāwhiti resource management plan process underway as well. So the timing seems to be appropriate to run this risk assessment on these 3 risks early in the new year. The remaining risk, capital projects, that is covered in this report, particularly the aquatic pools, Kiwa pools program and the wastewater treatment plant. And again, this will be another area where we will seek advice of the committee. The organisation already has a major projects process where all major projects, including these capital ones, are reported at an operational level. So again, just confirming the clarity needed on what is considered a capital project and what elevates a project into being a capital project to then come onto this committee. Well, for the purpose of the meeting today, the 2 projects that have been reported on, Kiwa pools and the wastewater treatment plant, they're being reported on because of the amount of capital, the construction cost involved in those 2 projects. And I'll speak to those risks further into the report. If we move to the next page, paragraph 4, the 2 heat maps. The first map on the left-hand side, the inherent risk rating, well, that does identify the level of risk the organisation is carrying with these risks without any actions being taken to manage them. And as the committee can see, they are all at the extreme end of our risk appetite. The residual risk ratings map on the right-hand side demonstrates how those risks are being managed and how we are trying to either prevent the risk event occurring or to minimise the impact if it does occur. And with those actions in place, we can see that we have 4 risks that are within council's risk appetite of moderate, and we have 5 risks that are outside our risk appetite. And of the ones that are outside the risk appetite, the most critical one is our asset management risk area, which is at serious. And that is primarily driven by the damage that our rating network has incurred over the last 6 to 8 months through the repeated rain events and flooding events that have impacted on our rating network. And again, I will speak to that in more detail further into the report. The remaining major risks, people and capability is our lead organisational risk, and that speaks to the shortage of skilled expertise the organisation is requiring in order to deliver its 8 objectives under the long-term plan. And there's a cascade or a knock-on impact of that, which is reflected in our natural environment risk. That major risk assessment is driven by the shortage of skilled people in that particular area of council business. Finance and procurement, on the other hand, at this point, are a precautionary risk assessment, given the wider business environment of continued high inflation, shortage of contractors, and supply chain disruption. The risk assessments were to put these 2 risks at major, that we could do whatever we could to prevent and minimise the impact of the wider market environment impacting on our ability to deliver services. And I think with these 2 risks, they demonstrate that while it's appropriate at this point to be prudent, that the longer the market continues to behave as it is, the more these risks start to become real and the more they impact on our ability to deliver on our objectives. So at some point, there may be a situation where we do need to come back to committee and council to introduce further actions, and that may impact on our ability to deliver the level of service anticipated. What I will do now is just go through each of the risks briefly and give a little more context to how we've arrived at the level of risk for each. So with civil defence and emergency management, it's assessed as major, which is outside our risk appetite. Again, that is primarily driven from the perspective that the function itself is currently situated in a building which is within our tsunami inundation zone. So that puts the operation at risk if that particular event was to occur. Management is taking action to address that and have located a site outside of that inundation zone and are in the process of putting together the process for constructing a purpose-built civil defence facility. Councillor.
Steve, looking at the maps, the map on the inherent risks ratings, everything's in serious. You've said, for example, CDM has been assessed as major, yet in the residual it's over. Yes. Sorry, when it's moderate, when our council's risk appetite is moderate. So for me, it would be more helpful to have had a left-hand map which showed our appetite to then show what has been assessed on the right-hand side. Because everything's on that left table is serious, and in fact now things have improved on the right-hand table, but that's not in fact what we say in the report, because everything is assessed as moderate and now it's major.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. We can make that distinction in the way we present this information.
Because I initially read it as being like, okay, the left-hand table is our inherent risks, and now we're actually seeing residual snapshot right now. Oh, hang on, both things have improved, but when I read your report, like some of them.
Yes, I understand the distinction you're looking for there. So yes, without doing anything, each of these strategic risks would have a serious impact on the council's ability to deliver on one or all of its objectives. And what we're trying to do is demonstrate the actions we're taking to ensure that we can deliver our objectives within the resources we've got and manage the risks of failure within an acceptable level. Yeah, so I do need to make that clarification of the threshold of moderate and when we're stepping over that and when we're living within it. Yes. So just coming back to the civil defence emergency management risk. So the advice from management is that operationally we can meet our civil defence and emergency management commitments, and we do have that ability at risk of a tsunami event impacting on our service delivery, and that risk is being managed through locating a site outside of the tsunami inundation zone and the intention of moving the civil defence emergency management function to that site.
On that point, Steve, was the information that this building was in the tsunami inundation zone not known at the time the council's risk appetite of moderate was assessed for CDM? Because I would have thought we'd known that for a while, and therefore it would have been a higher rating. Probably sitting at major. That's I'm sort of trying to reconcile the terms.
Through you, Bruce. So the tsunami maps were redone about 3 years ago, and that's when it was decided. Sorry, they only came out 2 years ago. They were publicly released, and that's when it came back into the tsunami zone when those were remapped. But when this was put back in, the old maps didn't have this in the inundation zone.
Tony, you raised a good point, by the way, about maps. The heat maps, and perhaps on reflection, the residual risk rating map is wrong around CDEM. It's not moderate. We're saying it's major. Okay, and I think what we're reflecting here is for the benefit of this meeting, we need to recognise that it's major, whereas the appetite is to have it as moderate. There are some pictorially, Stephen, we can talk about this offline, ways to show that, and I've seen with heat maps, which is essentially 3 circles, raw, residual, and targeted, which shows you the direction, you're trying to go on. But Tony, we'll do that outside of the meeting. But actually, it's also reflecting a good value that actually, and I love your questions, is actually it's starting to show the real value of what we've got here. We want to be moderate, we're major, let's get the building done and relocated. We should be right. Thank you, Steve. Keep going, please.
Thank you. And again, through you, Chair. So there is a further report to this committee on health and safety. But again, that level of risk is assessed as moderate, which is within our risk appetite. There is an ongoing health and safety risk as a result of staff turnover and challenges with replacing key roles with suitably qualified persons. So that is, again, a consequence or a associated risk under our people and capability risk.
Through you, Bruce. So paragraph 13 says that our current turnover is 24%. So these paragraphs don't address our vacant positions, do they? So it's churn, staff turnover. I'm assuming that's on an annualized basis. Currently, we're churning 24% of staff on an annualized basis. That's a risk under P&C, but also our vacancies and ability to fill vacancies, which I don't see to be addressed in this aspect of the report. Can you talk to that at all? Because obviously that's the vacancies is really the one that we seem to talk about most around the council table.
Is that something you can offer a comment on? You go. Oh, sorry, James.
I'm happy, and James can jump in through Bruce's. I think that's a really good point that you raise, Councillor Robertson, because it is an issue for us in terms of recruitment, what we've done, and we might maybe just need to capture that in our report, the steps that we're taking in terms of our recruitment process. So I think James would have presented an overview of that. It might be worthwhile that for the benefit of the new elected members, that we provide that again in terms of the initiatives that we've put in place to try and improve recruitment in this space. It's a challenge that everyone is facing nationally, again, with labour shortages and trying to recruit particular roles.
Sorry, yeah, I just want to clarify too, just you're correct in terms of churn, so attrition. Where it gets a little bit tricky is you can have that rate muddied by new roles. So if the vacancy exists because you've created a new role, as opposed to a role that was filled and then made vacant by whatever reason, that's what that figure captures there. So if we can articulate sort of what the vacancies look like, but you have to bear in mind that some of those might be new roles as opposed to attributed to the staff churn.
So when I read paragraph 13, and we had the stats for the other some other councils there, I thought that's not the best advertisement rather for come to Gisborne, because we're shedding 24% of our staff annually or turning over. Now it may be that what you just said, James, is that a new position has been created and that's captured in that statistic. That's actually a misrepresentation. If we are turning over 20% of our staff each year, then that's alarming for a number of reasons. If it's that we've got vacancies wrapped into that, then we need to pull that out, because it's not the best sales pitch when someone's looking to jump ship and they can see this data. Obviously, they can see this data somewhere because we can see it. Oh, well, would I go to Horowhenua? Well, they're churning a quarter of their staff a year. Would I go to Gisborne? They're churning 24%. I'll go somewhere that's got less churn because that reflects a different culture or whatever. So I don't know whether this data is correctly capturing our situation. And if it's not capturing as it needs to, because if it's visible to us, it must be visible to other people, and that may affect people's decisions to come here or not.
No, make a comment, Bruce. I mean, that's a reality, Councillor Robertson, is what the reality is of the sector in terms of turnover, in terms of labour shortage. We can't paint a pretty picture about that. You only need to look at all the headlines in every single sector across New Zealand. We have a significant labour shortage, and the stats are the stats, and we are on par with every other local authority in New Zealand in terms of the turnover. What I can say, so it doesn't capture the new roles that have been created. We've also got significant investment from central government that are creating. We've got another 4, maybe 6 new positions that are coming in that don't get captured in the vacancies that are in the turnover that is here. So this turnover is just purely related to our roles that we have, not the new roles that are coming in. But I just want to reiterate that this is a national problem. It is not, it's not just solely our issue, it is the sector's issue.
let's go back to my slides, introductory slides, and I just showed you that the other top 10 risks, and it's consistent across the country, regrettably. Colin.
So yes, on this, and it's a question I wanted to ask before it was brought up anyway, and I apologise if I step over that line, which I'm going to have to find my
We'll
way
correct you,
to.
Colin.
Is there an interview process done, and ideally an independent interview process done on those staff leaving to find out why? And is that available to the council as well as management? Thank you.
Yeah, through Bruce, we do conduct exit interviews. I'm happy to represent a deep dive on people and capability that might be useful for new members. In the previous presentation that I provided, I actually articulated a number of the reasons that staff have given for why they're leaving. And primarily we've addressed that. So I'm happy to do that work. It's largely operational, but certainly a theme was articulated for councillors to consider when they made decisions to help stem the flow.
This is a big, oh, sorry, Rob. No, you go for it, man.
Yeah, sorry, this question, my question wasn't actually about this, so if you want to finish.
Oh, okay.
So coming after that.
Yeah, okay, good. Yes, so put your hand back up when you want to get that question, Rob. That's absolutely fine. So we are in the position. I'm just keen that we keep moving on here. Health and safety, we're coming back to that. Steve, you were just summarising though that the vacancy factor, however we choose to, particularly the qualitative nature of where it's occurring, is giving rise to the risk around presumably our staff's well-being, because we're trying to cover 4 positions, etc. It creates challenges for the organisation to keep the lights on, basically. Well, that's dramatic, but you know what I mean.
Yes,
keep the work rolling out the door.
Through you, Chair, there's a number of components to it. There is the impact on the existing team, but equally we've put a number of actions in play to reduce the turnover rate and reduce the figures. And at some point we would need to revisit that and see if they are being effective, and if not, what other further actions are required, and potentially what additional resources are needed to address this, to get this particular risk back within our risk appetite. So that's my read of the conversation to this point is driving me to that outcome of what's this information telling us? Are the actions being taken effective? If not, what do we plan to do about it, and what's the impact on resourcing in order to get this risk back to a level we're comfortable with?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
You've got a comment. You're welcome to make a comment, buddy.
The benefit of new members. I mean, job churn's the highest it is in this nation since 1973, and we're not the only sector that's affected by that. You know, we're applying different treatments, like moving our medium income salary for staff. We've revamped our employer value proposition. We've cranked up our advertising. We've got a recruitment specialist on board who I'd like to say is doing a stellar job. Long may that continue, but it's a very tough market, and all indications are it's going to be like that for a while. We're an accredited employer with Immigration New Zealand. We've upped the ante in that space as well to find staff from wherever we can find them who are appropriate and fit for purpose for the roles. So yeah, I'm certainly open to any further ideas, but we've connected with Strategic Pay. We stay with them in terms of their recommendations around things to do. We've always been in competition with the private industry as well. So you've got that public versus private sort of sector competition that's ongoing. So yeah, it's an incredibly tough market at the moment.
Thank you, Riet.
I wanted to make, when I met up with all mayors last month, this is a theme that everyone raised, but something I think you didn't say out loud as well. But with all the reforms happening and all government agencies being hands-on, it's a very, I want to say it very diplomatically, it is an attractive proposition for someone to get on board with those reviews and then work for the government. So we also raised that with ministers directly, as saying there's a lot of work happening, but that means that some of our staff then goes to government organisations because it is just, they can pay more than we can. So it is, all mayors are. Do you need CPR?
Right, Tony, I think this might be final comment, please.
Yeah, maybe.
I'd like to keep moving, yes.
Yeah, maybe on that front, we should try to talk about secondment, so we don't lose our staff long term. They can just have them for 6 months or fill a position for a year, and we can have them back.
So James, you made an offer, and I know that within the last 6 months, you've done a very good deep dive with us about 6 months might be a wee bit longer, about the people and capability risk. But it possibly, because I mean, I don't think we necessarily have these audited in the biggest risk to the lowest risk. My sense is this is probably our biggest risk. So I think it would be quite useful if we look at perhaps how we do that. And it needn't be necessarily through the risk committee, albeit I would welcome that opportunity to have that again. So if we just keep that on mind as a point to perhaps discuss post-meeting as to how we pick it up, that would be good. Thank you, Steve. I wonder if I could just keep you moving, please. So if we could take it, unless there's something else you need to say, we've dealt with the people and capability risk as well. Oh, Rob, I thought you were into some different risk.
Sorry, it's still health and safety.
Oh, sorry.
Can I just have some clarification around point 9? It reads, the health and safety strategic risk is defined as the inability to adequately protect council staff and the community from hazards or events which compromise their physical and emotional well-being while delivering council services. Now, I don't know whether this is being looked at from this side, but if we take the two pieces of that paragraph, community and emotional well-being, we've got quite a big part of our community at the moment that are finding things really tough dealing with council around consenting issues. And the time that it's taking. And, you know, I've had quite a few people contacting me and I have passed on to our mayor. But a lot of these people are trying to run businesses, got mortgages, and they are finding it really, really tough emotionally. The time frame that it's taking. And this here to me says that we have got that's a strategic risk to us. This might not be financial to us, but I think reputationally, it's huge. If we have somebody string themselves up in a shed because they just can't take this anymore, that's not a very good look. And it will be the reason that comes out in the paper that says this is why this has happened. So, and look, I had one of those last night. I haven't had time to pass it on yet. So I think that says it, but I just wonder, because I noticed in the risk map residual around health and safety had gone back to moderate, and you know I think that this is something that's real, and we need to maybe look at how we assess it.
Thank you.
Can I respond? Because some of this stuff, and we've just received an update via email, you and I. Some of the stuff Rob are referring to, though, the stop clock doesn't sit with council. So the delays are not in the council buildings. It is requirements under the Resource Management Act, which, so I hear what you're saying, but if Nadine today pulled out all our resource consent stats, the vast majority would be processed within time. So I do think what you're referring to, and you and I am well aware, a lot of that is not caused by council processes slowing the resource consenting down. It is requirements that applicants need, but those requirements is not 100% in our court. Nadine, am I correct? Or please correct
I think
me.
we're getting into, like, you're getting into dangerous grounds if there is an assumption that a process is leading to the, you know, some form of direct contribution to someone's individual emotional well-being in the community. I think that presents a risk for all of council services and everything that council does in terms of its interaction and engagement with community. This risk here is about hazards or events that impact, and primarily it is about the actions that we take in order to keep our staff safe and the work that they do, and the assets that we maintain as well, like playgrounds to ensure, as a simple example, to ensure that we've done the right things by way of, you know, health and safety standards, as opposed to kind of a process whereby there are two parties involved and we don't actually understand the facts around that. So that is not part of the health and safety strategic risk here. Do you want to elaborate more on that, Steve, in terms of this?
Yes, it's, for example, we're in the middle of building a new aquatic centre, and at some point that'll be available to the public to use. So in that situation, we're looking to ensure that that facility is provided, that community can use it safely and without risk of harm. So in reference to this particular issue raised by the councillor, I will take that up with our health and safety manager and just work that through from a health and safety perspective. But the way the strategic risk is set up, it's if in delivering our services we are putting the community at direct harm or directly in an unsafe situation, then that's the risk we need to manage. If another person's particular situation is different to another's, that's not an issue or a situation we have direct control over. And so that would sit outside of our ability to influence.
Thank you for that. Thank you for raising that, Rob. Right, Steve,
Yes,
keep pushing on,
yes.
please.
So I've spoken to finance and procurement already. So if I move on to fraud and corruption, that is an ongoing and continual process. And I think just to pick up on the point raised earlier, the intention is that we will come back to this committee with our internal audit plan, and that audit plan will include more specific actions around the steps we're taking to manage the risk of fraud and corruption within the organisation. And legal compliance, there is some further work to be done to improve our management and evidencing of our management of our legal compliance responsibilities. So that is covered in this report and is an action that will be progressed. Natural environment, strategic risk, the level of risk that this risk is at is really again driven by our people and capability outcome. And paragraph 35 summarises the direct impact on our ability to deliver these services, in particular as a result of shortage of talent. With asset management, the primary driver of our strategic risk level here is the damage that our roading network has sustained this year. There has been some additional funding provided by Waka Kotahi, which is a fantastic result and much needed. However, this injection of funding in itself won't be the answer to restoring our network to the standard expected. And one of the major impacts has been the effects of inflation. Since this funding was provided, a large component of potential works has been lost given the effects of inflation, particularly on fuel prices. And there is a longer term impact here where it has been identified that it will take some length of time to restore our roading network back to the standard anticipated in our roading infrastructure plan. So there are some direct impacts, and this is a potential area for management to further engage council with around how we use our resources, given our situation, in terms of the level of roading standard across our network that we're able to provide our community.
On the roading, I'm talking to Steve and David, that there's a delay in receiving confirmation that government are going to stand by a situation, and then there's further delays in actually getting a job done. And this is crucial for a pothole, which doesn't stay at the same size for very long. We need to somehow lobby government to be able to get retrospective approval for these so that the job can be done early enough to prevent both us and government losing more money.
It's an interesting point. David, is there anything you'd like to say to that at this stage in terms of working with Karakia?
Through you, Bruce. Yeah, look, we're trying to see if we can fund up the cycles for things. We have had some improvement when it comes to flood works around how much further we're able to do, which we're trying to refine again with the events we've got at the moment. For other funding, it really does depend on prioritisation, but for the big delay is engineering, and then it's the preparation of our resource consents in order to get them done. Processing's fine. It's around actually getting everything we need to from our expertise in order to be able to get the funding approval from Kotahi. That is our biggest delay. Just the sheer scale of it's huge.
Tony.
Steve, what rates increase was calculated in that 9 to 12 year projection? Because obviously you could shorten that if you increase rates by 20%. So what sort of baseline rates, annual rates increase has been based for that 9 to 12 years?
For the chair, that information we'll be doing for the long-term plan and quite next year in the drafts of what is it the cost as part of the asset management plans and the financial strategy. So that is working and modelling within that. But Dave has also got an answer I can see at the same time.
Through you, Bruce, the current regional land transport plan has $161 million of deferred work that we are going to have to try and prioritise through this regional land transport plan. So we will have to look at the rates impact of including that over the 10-year plan that we have coming forward, including the works that have been deferred as well.
Sorry, neither of those questions shed any clarity for me. That statement says it will take 9 to 12 years to catch up, to get back to where we were. Is it 9 to 12 years with using the same annual rates increase that we're doing about 6.5 at the moment or whatever, or are we going to, for the ratepayer, and the media is sitting here, and that's a great thing for them to report, it's going to take 9 to 12 years to catch up, but if our community ends up paying more rates, will that be shortened? And what's the rates increase that figure is based upon?
Through you, Bruce. So for us to get the network back up would take 9 to 12 years, and it would take the additional $161 million that is not rated for would need to be added to rates in order to catch the network back up to where it is. So it does come down to affordability in our community and our taxpayers' ability to pay as well.
So that unit should say it will take 9 to 12 years and an additional $161 million to get the roads back to how they were.
Through each year, it's probably going to be higher than that. We bring that number to you in your long-term plan discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
I think that's, Tony, I think that's, thank you for the clarity that you like around numbers, which I do appreciate. And it does reflect, I think, in a position, unfortunately, Steve, that we recognised at the last meeting, that when you take all these together, the nature of the risk environment for Gisborne and for the benefit of everybody and the rest of the sector is actually toughening, and it's going to only crystallise with actually this annual plan, not just the LTP. Certainly the 161 million is a strategic issue which is going to be centre, and because of our risk framework, it's still red. We're struggling 161 million, and as you say, David, with inflation and supply chain, probably a bigger number. You can see the challenge that collectively around the table, perhaps not as this committee obviously, but as a council, is going to be the challenge. So that's really helpful. Okay, I'm conscious that there are a couple of other pages. You've mentioned Kiwa Pools and the wastewater treatment plant, which I'm taking as information, and some of the direction, particularly around treaty commitments and climate change risk assessments, which I just really want to endorse. Both those. Is there anything else that you need to raise with stage, Steve?
No, through you, Chair. Really, the last two items in the report, general risk management, local government risks. I think the summation is that we have a combination of strategic risks that will exercise this council's decision-making on where to apply its resources for best outcome. And I think the timing is as good as it can be that we have a new administration. This risk process has highlighted these key strategic risks that are of concern. And as we are about to go into a strategic process in the new year, we are well placed to provide councillors with the level of information needed that you can make the right decisions around how you best see resources being applied.
Steve, you started with a couple of points that you wanted to consult the committee over, and one was the workshop. And I think if I can say from the welcome questioning from you, Colin and Rob and Tony, I think it would be good for us to do that for two reasons. One, to relook at the total risk profile, and to clarify we would have input as to why it is a risk. And I think the debate, for instance, around the 9 to 12 and it's 161 million, the debate around what is the qualitative nature of our 24% vacancy factor, it's just adding value to our understanding as elected members. So again, offline we can chat about when and what is the best time, but it strikes me probably in the lead into the annual plan would be useful, but we'll talk about that. The second thing was, you said, what do we do in the area of CapEx reporting, given you have another committee that deals with that, and we certainly shouldn't be asking to either relitigate or to deal with that. I think you've pitched it right in terms of this report, and members speak up if you're not agreeing with me. To have the information there simply, reasonably, succinctly is fine. I've read it on the basis that, to me, my antennae says these are important projects. We've got significant funding either out of the community, and particularly significant funding with Crown Infrastructure Partners, let alone a key outcome in terms of better services for our community. I just like to know it's on track. You say it's on track, that's what it says there. We've got a process in place, that's fine. I am more interested, well, I am as interested from a capital point that we have systems and processes in place. So the critical thing is, what are we doing around project management? What are we doing around prioritising our capital program in light of the challenges that we're talking about, inflation and supply chain, and to some extent, what is that progress? So it's actually, I think, the committee's role to lift our sights up on that risk rather than repeating the work that is being done by another committee, and indeed has a level of operational in its nature. Does that make sense? Any committee want to add to that at all? Makes sense? Good. So can look, that's really helpful, believe it or not, and I just want to say, Steve, thank you again. And I talked about our maturity development, and this is really important. Let's remember, we have done the hard yards, and we want to reconfirm it. We've done the hard yards with the past council over risk appetite. We are signalling that some matters are above what we are prepared to tolerate. And indeed, I appreciate the fact you give an indication of actually what is the additional work that we are doing. You've come with solutions, so I'm very grateful. It's part of the thing that's being done. So thank you for that. Can I just move, and I will move from the chair. It always seems like such a little resolution when we've had such a good discussion, Steve, but I'll move that we note the context of the report. Thank you, Tony. Appreciate that. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you very much for that. Again, good report. All righty. We're at 10:15, and David, I noticed you're here, and I take it that John is not online until after morning tea, correct? So if I've got it correct with the leave of the committee, I just wonder if we hold fire on Gisborne Holdings and move straight into the health and safety report, which is actually isn't necessarily such a bad fit, given we've had a bit of a chat about health and safety already, David. So, oh, you've heard it? Good. Okay. And you may even have a comment on Rob's good question. So, look, if we'll just informally move directly into your item, and we'll come back to the Gisborne Holdings. Thank you. Is it 62? Thanks, David. When your hands, man.
Morning, Anna all. Welcome to Colin and Rob, the new councillors. Can I take it as the report has been read?
Yes, you can.
Cool. Right. Key points, not too much.
Are we there?
Yes, be very keen to see you.
Yep, key points too. Contractor management continues to be an area which we can actually say has been strengthened by additional resource focused on TMP, traffic management, and also the roading working network. We're all aware that there's additional pressure on our already stretched roading network, and a time of incidents generally spiking just before the run up to Christmas. So we put added emphasis onto contractor management and support where we can. That includes additional verification and assurance by the team. In addition to that, we've got an influx of students. So we're going through a robust student induction process. They're here from December through to February. So we want to make sure they're safe. Other than that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, David. Good and succinct. Members, we said we've read the papers. There are questions that we have. Yes, Josh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report. I just wanted to ask about on page 68, paragraph 25, in regards to wellbeing at work, because that's a great result that's come out of the survey from staff. I was wanting to know what the process was that the organisation was going to undertake in order to be able to keep that high level of, I guess, psychological well-being and broader well-being of our staff. Just noting that the bulk of the report in regards to health and safety has been around, I guess, our PCB obligations, around injury, etc., etc. I wanted to know, was there a staff view around what we'll be doing in order to be able to maintain that? Because I feel like that would be directly linked to, say, staff retention and all of those kinds of things.
Yeah, really good question. We work in conjunction, so health and safety, people and capability, with our culture partner as well in the organisation. We have a culture group. We're looking at a number of initiatives over the course of the next 12 months, which will help to keep these results high. We've got we've recognised mental health. We've done a number of initiatives there. It's something we're constantly working on. Fleur's doing an awesome job to make sure that we keep on top of these good results and develop initiatives to keep them high. It's a constant work on for us, because you're right, it goes hand in glove with people and capability in terms of staff retention, ensuring that we've got a good workplace culture and that we keep wellbeing front and centre where staff are concerned.
Thank you, Josh. Yes, Colin.
And it may be because it's in a different format, but there's no mention of Curry Construction or Siteworks or other smaller contractors on the reporting accidents. Great.
Yeah, through the chair, that's a good comment on that, Colin. We kept the tier 1 contractors generally, but I think you're right. I think Curry Construction have just taken on a few bigger projects, and they should be included in that report. So that's something I'll address at for the next report.
We've focused with our state, focus on the big contractors, while also trying to understand more broadly what is the system for all contractors, but in terms of reporting results, to get a sense of the combined PCBU, we're focused on the big boys.
Colin, it doesn't mean to say we don't have interactions with Curry Constructions and projects as well. We are actually following them quite closely, and we have been doing that succinctly, even at the skate park, which wasn't under our auspices. Yeah, cool.
Which is a good systems question. Sorry, was it David?
Just through you, Bruce, I think it's around how we report, given the number of contractors that we have working across our networks for us. So we have a huge range of contractors and subcontractors. Where we have entered into a contract with any of our contractors directly to deliver works, we have health and safety protocols, we have reporting protocols and those things. For this committee, this could be hundreds of different companies that we're working with on different places, but the processes are in place around the reporting of Curry's, Siteworks, Blackbees, Kudu's. I can rattle off for hours how many we have who have the appropriate health and safety measures in place that we are spot auditing and checking on. The reason why we don't have as much reporting from the tier 2s and 3s in particular is because they're quite cumbersome, some of the additional things they would need to do to report report on this to us. The tier ones have these processes in place. However, we do know that they do have appropriate health and safety standards as part of our checks and the things we've been doing. But I'm just hesitant to report on every single one of them up to this committee because it's quite a volume of work.
You anticipated my comment, David, which was our role first and foremost is around systems. What is the process by which we do that? So I think, Colin, that's the key thing, that getting the tier one contractors does enable us to get by volume a key part of the contracts which are carried out by other contractors, but it shouldn't be at the total lack of a sight of us of what's happening elsewhere, but the oversight of what's happening elsewhere is primarily through a systems-based approach. So actually what this does raise 2 or 3 questions for me, David and David. One of them is how do we select what we do in the way of spot checks of the rest? Okay, number one. And number 2, does that take into account if we have a contractor increasing, at least by volume, there's potentially a greater risk? Do we take into account in terms of actually how we spot check and manage the non-tier one contractors?
Good question, Bruce, through the chair. Yeah, for example, went down to the Apollo, the Kiwi pool build, and Apollo are the main contractors there. They had 7 separate contractors on site. We did a site review on that. So we're actually picking up contractors that work for us independently and working as a subcontractor under the main contract. We're selective when we drive out. I drove up to Tapuia the other day. We stop off, we talk to the likes of Thornton Hogan, Downer, where we see sites and have those spontaneous audits. We have regular meetings with the main contractors when they come in. Health and safety is first on the agenda. What are we doing? What we're seeing? So we're good for the amount of resource we've got on health and safety, but there is an expectation that the PCBU takes that duty of health and safety primarily. We support that, and part of our duties under Section 34 overlapping duties are to ensure we can cooperate and coordinate with those contractors.
Thank you, David. Sorry, Andy, you next.
So through you, Bruce, just for lifelines in particular, which is where a lot of these issues need to be managed, we get a daily report across our roadie network where every single contractor is going to be across the network. They have to submit to us every day. So I've got the daily report in front of me at the moment. I know where everybody is across the whole network. What we do is we try not to pick on one company doing different types of work. It is very much going and auditing. So we have Mo in our team who looks after traffic management side. Him and Kelly are undertaking audits daily. We then also have our network inspectors that are undertaking audits too when they turn up, and there's an expectation of that they are checking for health and safety compliance as they're driving around. So they need to be making sure that traffic management and every single staff member has a mandate to turn up and check for health and safety. And that's something that we all need to be doing. The other part of it is we also have a new role within our hub around health and safety for lifelines as well, for checking and going out and spot checking to work with Dave Wilkinson around how do we actually deliver this given the amount of risk that sits across the hub. So a lot of the things are very much what's happening where, what are the types of work that have been undertaken, but then also who have we not gone and had a look at for a while as well. So the teams are very much proactively looking across the network and knowing there's probably 600 sites open at the moment across the network, and that's water and roading as well. So making sure we're checking, and that is our role, to be checking that they are doing everything that they're supposed to be doing under their contract, and those things are in place.
Thank you. That's helpful. Very helpful. Andy.
Sort of address it. I heard comments like as they were driving around and while they were at Tapuia, and I just wondered whether the spot checking was on a formal schedule or whether it was, just so that no one fell through the cracks, whether there was a formal process for those spot checks. And then David said that he was talking about businesses that they hadn't looked at for a while, so that seems to indicate that there probably is some sort of schedule.
You have a comment on that, Dave?
Yeah, again, it's around knowing our contracts, knowing what's happening across the district, but then also working in with their health and safety staff as well. So a lot of these contracts, actually all of our big ones that we're using, and even our mediums, have a health and safety lead in those organisations. So it's working with them, talking to them about understanding what's happening with Black Bee, going and talking to Hartor about what's happening there, going to talk to Currys to have a chat to their team as well to make sure we know exactly what's happening with their health and safety managers around our expectations, compliance and those sort of things. So there is very much a how are our contractors tracking, where are they working, and who do we need to catch up with?
Yeah. Any other questions? Sorry, I think look, I do just want this sort of last question, David, if that's okay. Could I just turn us to paragraph 26? So again, as you know, my interest is always in systems, trying to think about, do we have the appropriate approach in place? And you've got opportunities for improvement or enhancement, or dare I say, things that we probably aren't doing right at the moment. And I tried to get I tried to think, how would I generalize what I see in this? But I'm going to ask you to do that for me. How pivotal are these to our health and safety system? Are they ones that we will all tick off in what sort of time scale, or are they nice to have?
Cool. Through the chair, I think all of those improvement opportunities that are critical are important. The challenges we've faced have been already discussed in relation to staff turnover and changes of positions and roles. When somebody comes into a new role, it takes them a bit of time to get up to speed. Health and safety is a part of that, getting up to speed. So there is minimal risks or risks when people first start, and to become familiar with our systems. The aspect of Vault Damstra, that we've just had an upgrade which was forced upon us, and there's a lot more training required to actually get people up to speed with utilising the system, which isn't utilised as well as it or effectively as it could be. But that's down to me and to my team to get out and to actually make sure that people are using the ability to and know the ability of what that system does for us. Health and wellbeing, we've just recruited or just about to announce a recruitment to a health and safety role, which is now health, safety and wellbeing. I think is incorporated in most roles for health and safety. So a large proportion of that percentage of that role will be required to look at the health and wellbeing of our staff, which again is a critical part of my plans over the next 5 years. Other than that, I think everything else in there has been addressed or is about to be addressed.
Good. Well, I'd encourage you to keep us up to date with those.
Certainly
because
will.
they're obvious. I mean, they do make a lot of sense. If we haven't got buy-in to Vault or whatever system we ever choose to use, we've got a reasonably core fundamental of our initiatives. It's not going to work. So I'll be very keen to see how that carries on, and that we are developing and enhancing the way that you say, which would make sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.
Right, final call for questions on this. Can I see as, pardon? You'll move it. Thank you, Ria. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Josh. Appreciate that. Again, I think it always seems, David, like we don't do more than just note, but that's fine. That's our role. So we note the contents. So I'll put that motion, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, it's carried. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Can we take a seat, please, people? Pardon?
I'm appearing into Cookie this week.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It was sort of like a dumb mistake, wasn't it, Tony?
Yeah. Morning, Mr. Ray.
Morning, Josh.
Hey, John. Bruce Robertson here. We'll do some introductions once we get going.
Morning, Bruce.
And get folk here.
You should be in bed, my friend.
Can I invite you to go? Can I invite you to go?
I'm fine.
You're fine. I'm sending you lots of healing love.
Thanks.
Right. If I could just ask us to reconvene. We're still in public, and just to reflect, but also given the way it's worked with having done health and safety, we'll then move into public excluded to deal with our further discussion with our colleagues here from Gisborne Holdings. So look, it's great to have you all here. John, great to have you here by way of Zoom. Appreciate that. I'd just like to check whether everybody in the room knows John, or indeed our guests down the way. Do we need to go around the room just with introductions? You know John,
We know
you know Andrew, you know Sharon, all down there, that's fine. John, I'm probably the only person then that you don't know, Bruce Robertson. I'm the independent chair of the risk committee here, and I have been that for about the last 2 or 3 years. Is it longer, Paul? I can't remember. It feels about right. And so look, it's great that you can be here with us as well. So look, the first item is actually dealing with the accountability. Yeah, Tony?
Public excluded at the moment?
No, we're not. We are in public. So, oh look, now, Rob, if I could invite you to deliver to your declaration of interest. John, just for your benefit, and Andrew and Sharon, when we started the meeting, Rob.
Sophie, not Sharon.
Did I say Sharon?
Sophie.
Sorry, Sophie. Starts with S, but that's not the right name, please. Sorry about that, Sophie. My apologies. Rob declared an interest because we're looking at the annual report. It's when Rob was a director, and he will sit this one out by moving from the table down to the public session, down to the public seats, and we'll keep going from here. So this definitely is in public. My understanding is that your report has been made public. You've had the AGM. This is actually a really sort of a red letter day for this committee, because this is something, quite frankly, that we've been angling for, because obviously the committee has a responsibility for the group accountability and the group accounts. So while we might try a slightly different timing next year, it's tremendous that actually we have you folk here, and I'm really pleased that that's the case. So, Pauline, I just wonder whether there's anything you want to do and lead off to the paper, or do we go to, I think it might be good, then we will invite John and team to raise any points they'd like to over the auditor's comments, or indeed the annual report.
In this particular case, I'll let them lead
Speak,
the discussion,
okay.
and if there's any queries or things from a group perspective,
Great.
I'm happy to come in at that point.
Thank you, that's great. So, John, I make some assumption that maybe you lead off, or Andrew or Sophie. I'm quite relaxed, but if you could talk to us and the audit process and indeed the annual report, that would be great.
Thank you. And look, given logistics and my reasonably befuddled brain, might be better to leave it to Andrew to start us off, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions. Sophie and Andrew, or Sophie has done a bit of work in preparation for this, but if you would perhaps lead the way, and I can support where necessary.
Thank you. Is there any sort of opening comments you'd like to make? Headline?
Oh look, yeah, I certainly will do that, Bruce. Look, I don't think that there should be any illusion that there is no position that would see us being able to maintain our current asset portfolio without some changes. I think you can see in the annual accounts and the commentary that goes with it that we have been paying dividends to the council from either deferred OPEX, CapEx, or sale of assets, combination of all of those most of the time over the last 4 to 6 years. And the board has worked very hard to meet the council's expectations. And this should be of no news to anyone, because it was the same presentation I gave to the AGM, but worked really hard to meet the council's desires to have a $2 million plus dividend, and has done so pretty consistently over the last years. However, that has come at some cost to our balance sheet. And I guess when I took over, I called time on that, and the annual report is really we need to really take a rain check and think about where we go going forwards. We don't believe as a board that doing what we've always done is going to give us an answer that is acceptable either for the company or for our shareholder. So that would be my introductory words, and many of the items that are picked up in the audit report reflect back on matters that have come through apropos that sort of context.
Thank you, John. So look, I wonder if just for the sake of the conversation, Andrew, you invite you to make comments. But for the sake of it, the item that's in front of us is actually essentially to receive the auditor's comments and to understand from you how the audit went and what is what is basically the core components of the annual report. So I'd like to perhaps deal with that. I then would also particularly like to follow up on John's comments about the prospect of the future of the company. Standard stuff to do when we've got the annual report in front of us. So I wonder, we have Stuart's, the auditor's highlights memorandum or closed out report, I think they call it these days. Is there anything from there, and perhaps I'm looking past you, Andrew, to Sophie, that you want to raise? I think anybody involved with the sort of investment vehicle that Gisborne Holding is concerned, the sorts of issues, Sophie, that were being looked at by the auditors all seem to make sense. But is there anything that you wanted to raise out of Stuart's report for our attention? I'd be interested to know. Oh, yes, thank you. Yes, it is important. The little red button is showing. Sorry.
Yes.
So that...
No, I think that the audit report reflects exactly what's happening within the company. Just, yeah, the change in the accounting treatment for the carbon credits is a major change in the way we are reporting accounts. That's the main thing for this year. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Andrew, anything from you, Sue?
No, I can assume that everyone's had a good look at the audit report. And Gia, are there any questions of us that we don't understand about the audit report or you'd like more clarity on? Are there any? I'm got total confidence in I think the process that I saw. Obviously, Sophie was very, right involved with the audit report from day one and did a great job and got total confidence in how the process went and the outcome. I thought it was actually a pretty good outcome. So happy about that. But there's bound to be some questions I would have thought around anything in there that.
I suspect it might be Tony. It sounds like you're going to lead off, mate.
I saw Tony looking at me, so I thought there's got to be a question.
So on page 23 of 74, which is page 5 of the report, the bottom paragraph under the heading Internal Financial Controls, the final sentence, the second to last sentence says, we haven't identified any significant deficiencies in internal controls, have identified a number of opportunities to improve processes and controls. They are being communicated to you in the report of control findings. Have you got confidence that you've got both the resources and the capacity to implement those proposed, identified, improved processes and controls?
I've got total confidence we've got the right resources to be in control and complete those controls. We've had quite a number of changes in our team, in our management team, but that hasn't at all taken any confidence out of us as far as being able to stay in control. John?
I share that view. There have been a lot of changes, but I would argue that we're actually more streamlined and more focused on the stuff that really matters than we were previously. So I'm also comfortable.
Great. Colin.
While we're on the same page 23, the council's expectation was 1.9 million, and yet you paid 2.7 million, and yet you're saying that you overcommitted. Just wondering why that happened.
I'm not certain, Colin, that actually John used the word overcommitted. I think it was more a case of actually how they funded the dividend flow. So I perhaps want to be careful that we don't put words in John's mouth that he didn't quite say. But I take your point. Sophie, I think you're going to make a comment.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. So the distribution policy is a calculation policy, if you looked at the policy in the statement of intent. So yes, we have a minimum distribution to meet, but the calculation is based on the actual cash profit, and 50% of the cash profit will be a distribution to GDC. Yes, we are paying more because we passed the minimum.
Thank you, Con. Any other questions, folks? Yes, so the annual report, Colin, so if you've got questions on the annual report, that's fine too.
Just a figure, I was at the AGM, John, and you said there were a lot of stock losses, and I've just been analysing the stock numbers, and it doesn't appear to be massive stock losses. I mean, there's a shift from sheep to cattle by some number, and then a small decrease in sheep.
Can you just, Colin, for the benefit of the other members, just reference what page you're looking at? Oh, you're looking at the annual report. We need what page of the annual report? 55, which is, I'm just going off our agenda, sorry. Yeah, it's page, what are we here? 54 or 74. Thank you.
Colin, two things. One, I was referring to the lack of capital maintenance on the farm at the AGM. And one of our challenges has been if we pay a dividend, we haven't been able to do the capital maintenance that we would have liked, particularly given the adverse weather events that we've had over the last couple of years. And we did in fact lose, it was reported that we lost 500 lambs, and you'll remember I referred to that number. We're pleased to announce that, that the lambs which had disappeared off into the forest thought better of their decision to leave our premises and made their way back onto our premises at a subsequent date. So we're pleased to be able to say that the holes that let them out also allowed them to get back in. So we're delighted to announce that we didn't have that level of stock losses. They are still reasonably normalized stock losses, but that's not an indication of how well fenced the property is, just to be clear.
Thank you, Colin. Any other questions from folk? Yes, go for it, Colin.
And it may be my accounting ignorance, but on page 36, the term loan, which I've since been told has got something to do with this building, suddenly appears in 22, but isn't in 21. Can you explain where it's come from and how it's suddenly appeared?
Again, if you just refer to the page that you're looking at here.
Page 36.
Yes,
in the middle, current liabilities.
Yeah, the balance sheet.
Term loan. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we're all looking at our agendas rather than the actual annual report. No, that's okay, mate. Understand that.
I can answer that. The term loan's actually sitting up in current liabilities, and it's just how we structured our lending. We went through a bit of a restructure with the bank early in the year, and we decided to take a short-term view on the loan. Simply because we're doing a lot of deep dive work as to what we might think the future might look like, and we didn't want too much commitment out too far. So it's sitting up in the term loan and the current liabilities here, Colin.
Supplementary question then. This makes it look, difficult and dangerous. Is it possible to cover that with a small sale of carbon credit?
It's possible, Colin, but that's what the next chunk of work is all about. It's working through what is possible, what is right, and what is the best decision to make going forward. So, yeah,
so I think it's important, just technically, if I've got this right. it is term debt, it's long-term debt.
Yes.
But it has effectively matured, or it's in the point of maturing, or
Yes.
you have chosen to take it on a short term. So it's had to move categories from long-term column into the
Yes.
short-term column. And that actually attracted the attention of the auditors.
Yes.
Because you have a very substantial negative working capital ratio. And I guess the question is what you intend to do with it. And I mean, you've answered that, but actually in terms of looking at your business plan going forward, that will determine what you
Yes.
do with that debt.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's still there.
It's still there.
Can I
It
just-
hasn't gone away. That's right. Yeah.
It hasn't just jumped and it hasn't
Yeah.
just turned up
Yeah.
either. It's been with us.
Can I just add, Bruce, look, it's really important to understand there is a bit of tension. The bank and have a fantastic relationship with us, so that let's not question that. What we were reluctant to do was to provide them with security over the full farm with the numerous titles and the cost that would incur until we had been through the facilitation with councillors, which we undertook last year. And so we asked for the bank's indulgence to roll the facility out till February next year. And that's why it goes into the current section. But we have already obviously re-engaged with them. We're currently seeking an ability to change the securities, hopefully from the farm, which is their preference, obviously, because it's a big number, to security over some additional land that we have at Dunstan Road. Which would give them, they're already over secured, but as banks want to do, they want more security than they need. We're trying to avoid giving them title over the whole farm for obvious reasons. So there's a bit of negotiation, but having said that, we remain fully confident that that relationship with the bank is in good shape. We met with them virtually probably 2 weeks ago, just to keep that process ticking over.
Yes, Tony. Thank you, Colin.
Is there any additional costs associated with having taken that term loan into a temporary overdraft or a temporary loan facility?
Hasn't been to date, Tony, but part of our discussions with the bank is if we do this, do we have extra cost? If we do this, do we have less cost? What happens to our terms regarding our cost of funds? And so that's where we have to.
I think I read the report, 8 months, you've got about an 8-month extension, what you're looking at the moment. And so in that period, plan is to obviously get some further direction on.
Push it out further. Yep, absolutely.
I might have missed it, but I didn't see anywhere in the Ernst Young report where it talked about potential benefits, tax benefits in relation to this relationship and for this building and to you guys. Did I miss that? Is that covered in there? Because I mean, they've covered other key costs like the carbon credits, liabilities.
Just if I could answer that, Tony, it's a problem for us as a group. It's not really a problem for us. We pay a dividend to you net of tax, so the auditors wouldn't opine on that. It's not efficient, which is why PwC told us it wasn't very efficient. But I don't think it's an audit matter.
Yes, sorry. Sorry, I was just trying to find, Tony, there is a reference to tax, but not that particular matter in the report. Sorry, I was just trying to check what it was. Thanks, Colin.
Sorry, but on mine, page 58, and it's transactions with related parties. The last one, a bulk of others at 2.4 million. Can someone break that open a little bit, please? Thank you.
Page 56, just use your
Colin, your microphone.
Yep, we're on there. Just ask your question again.
Sales to related parties, right down the bottom, it has others, 2.4 million. I mean, it's just not sort of defined very well as to what it applies to.
Sophie?
Happy to answer. It's the sale of the Bank Street land to GDC.
It's a classic trap of annual reporting when other is the biggest item in the column. It's, can I suggest as an old auditor, not necessarily easy to go that way. Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for the question, Colin. Okay, is there anything else, folk, that we need to ask these people? Thank you, Riet. Do we have a seconder, please? Thank you. Look, and just before I put it, I just want to reflect, Riet, if I could insert myself here, is we're going to go into the next session, Andrew, and one of the things that I was focused on was actually that change in debt. So it does suggest that there is a business planning process, a decision-making process, which the company has got to obviously go through to make a decision about its balance sheet structure and obviously how it's going to operate. So I would like to ask that question, but I'm going to bring it up in the next section because I think that's probably the more relevant place to be. So, and sorry, Red, just because I did actually one other question, and obviously, Pauline, the critical thing is we've had this information, it's been under our own annual report, we've got the group situation. It's good to know that you've got a clean bill of health from the auditor. The stuff that, as you said, Sophie, was the logical stuff, the valuation of the assets, the collection of the revenue. It makes a lot of sense from that perspective. So, Red, thank you for your motion. And I had a seconder who was. Thank you, Tony. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against? It's carried. Thank you for that. Can we just move to item 11, please, because we have already dealt with 10.3, which is health and safety, which is the resolution to move into public excluded. And that's on page 74 of 74 for the reasons that are said. And look, I think it's probably also important that we invite and note that John, Andrew and Sophie will also, you're welcome to stay with us for the next item, which is, again, Gisborne Holdings Limited and the risk environment. So you're welcome to stay, and I think we should just record that in the resolution as well too, please. So I'll move, we go into public excluded for the reasons, and that we have our external guests here to stay as well. Thank you, Riet. Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against?